You woke up this morning, rolled over, grabbed your phone, checked the silver ticker, and saw it sitting pretty at $80.70. And you felt it, didn't you? That quiet, smug little hum in your chest, that feeling of absolute vindication. You were right all along, and the skeptics were wrong. So take a deep breath and listen to me very carefully. That feeling is the single most dangerous thing you own right now, and it is far more dangerous than being wrong. It is infinitely more dangerous than missing the trade entirely, because you think you understand the story of why silver is moving right now. The narrative, the mainstream media is feeding you about safe haven flows, geopolitical jitters, and a little sprinkle of fear premium is a meticulously crafted lullaby. It is a story written specifically for you by the exact people who need you to stay perfectly calm, while the floor beneath the entire global pricing system caves in. Let's strip away the noise and picture a cargo ship captain in the Strait of Hormuz last Thursday, standing on the bridge, staring at his radar. The massive vessels ahead of him aren't pushing forward through the passage. They are pulling U-turns and reversing course. They are reversing course in the middle of one of the most heavily trafficked, economically vital energy corridors on the planet. Iranian gunboats have just fired on a tanker, and the United States military is announcing it will board Iran-linked vessels anywhere on Earth. So this captain, looking at a shipping lane that carries roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply, makes the only rational decision a human being can make. He hits the brakes, he simply stops, and now look at how every major financial headline spun that exact moment over the weekend. Precious metals gain on safe haven demand as Middle East tensions rise, gold approaches records, and silver follows. It sounds clean, simple, and easily digestible for the retail crowd, but it is almost entirely beside the point. Because here is what that captain's decision actually set in motion, and I promise you, it has absolutely nothing to do with fear. Energy supply shocks do not just make it more expensive to fill up your Honda Civic, they violently hike the cost of pulling silver out of the dirt. They explode the cost of refining it, transporting it, and insuring it across hostile oceans. And every single hour that Strait stays closed, the real world cost climbs. And here's the kicker, that cost increase does not show up on the futures price flashing on your screen. It shows up weeks later, hidden in the massive premium that a solar factory in Shenzhen or a mint in Jaipur has to pay just to get the actual metal. The futures price you see on your app is a heavily managed bedtime story, while the physical premium is the cold, hard truth. And right now, those two numbers are divorcing so fast that the gap between them is where entire institutional fortunes are being quietly rearranged. But Hormuz isn't even the part that should keep you awake tonight. It's the second event that almost zero major media outlets bothered to cover properly. That event exposes just how incredibly fragile this whole paper architecture really is, because India went dark this week. Let me rephrase that. Because I need you to understand the scale here. India isn't just a major buyer of silver. They are the single largest consumer on Earth. And this week, Indian banks suddenly halted all new import orders for gold and silver from overseas suppliers. The government simply didn't issue the formal authorizations required to process the current cycle of import permits. On paper, it's just bureaucratic red tape and a procedural delay, the kind of boring excuse that gets a two-line mention in a wire right before the sport scores. Except it didn't just vanish, because when the biggest whale in the ocean stops eating, the global supply chain doesn't politely hit pause and wait for the paperwork. It fractures, and domestic physical inventories in Mumbai are draining as we speak, while wholesale dealers who were expecting massive shipments are calling each other, and the phones are just ringing out. Premiums in the Indian wholesale markets are suddenly climbing by whole dollars, not pennies, and every single scheduled ounce is sitting in a vault somewhere in London or Zurich. It is technically available, but practically stranded, because the buyer, who was meant to absorb it, just got kneecapped by an unsigned piece of paper. Reuters buried a single terrifying sentence in their wire report, warning that supply shortages are coming if this is not resolved quickly. That is the understatement of the decade. This is the world's deepest demand center being surgically disconnected from the supply grid. It is being disconnected at the exact moment the global supply grid is already running on fumes. And that brings us to the third fracture, the big one, the one hiding in plain sight right inside the warehouse ledgers. Let's talk about the COMEX, the exchange that most Western investors bow down to as the definitive source of global price discovery. Right now, the COMEX is sitting on registered physical inventory levels so horrifyingly low that even the mainstream suits on financial television are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. 200 million ounces of physical silver have completely evaporated from those vaults over the last few years. I don't mean transferred, and I don't mean reallocated on a spreadsheet. I mean they are completely gone. Physically loaded onto trucks and pulled out by entities who suddenly decided they would much rather hold the cold, hard metal themselves. They would rather do that than trust a piece of paper that promises some guy in New York has it safe for them. At Friday's close of $80, $70 per ounce, we are talking about over $16 billion worth of metal that no longer exists inside the exchange system. That is $16 billion of collateral that used to back the endless ocean of paper contracts still trading right now. Picture a massive bank vault with a glass front, and every week you stand there and watch another armored car pull up, load up, and drive away. The digital display above the vault still says everything is totally fine and solvent, but your own two eyes are telling you the shelves are empty. And that is the COMEX right now. Now, let's look east, because while the West plays with paper, the East is dealing in reality. On Friday, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the largest physical marketplace serving the biggest manufacturing economy on Earth, was quoting physical silver at a premium of $12 to $13 above the COMEX paper price. $13, that is not a rounding error, and that is not a temporary market quirk. In a functioning, healthy market, an arbitrage gap like that closes in a matter of hours. The smart money buys cheap paper in New York, takes physical delivery, ships it to Shanghai, sells it at the massive premium, and pockets the difference until the prices match. But that mechanism is broken. The premium has persisted for months, and the physical metal simply cannot move freely or fast enough to close the gap. Chinese industrial buyers are vacuuming up every single ounce they can find, at whatever premium the physical market demands. Shanghai is no longer waiting for New York's permission to price silver. Shanghai is grabbing a megaphone and telling the world that New York's numbers are completely fabricated. So, here is the core belief I need you to completely abandon right now. You have been taught that the silver price is set by natural supply and demand interacting fairly on regulated exchanges. You've been told the number on your app is reality, but it is a lie. The price you see is a consensus fiction. The price you see is maintained by a paper derivatives market that is actively bleeding out the very metal it claims to price. Why is it bleeding? Well, because we are in year 6 of a structural deficit. The Silver Institute, not some guy with a whiteboard on YouTube, but the official boring industry body, confirms that for 6 straight years, global demand has violently outpaced global supply. We are burning the furniture to keep the house warm, and you can't just fix this by turning up a dial. Nobody funded new mining projects when silver was pinned at $20 for a decade. The lead time to find silver, dig a hole and pour the first ounce, is 7 to 10 years. The deficit is baked into the cake, and the cure is a decade away. Which means the only mechanism left to balance the market is price. Price has to rise high enough to literally destroy demand, but silver demand is inelastic. The companies building solar panels, EVs, and military targeting systems don't stop buying because silver hits $100. They stop buying when the price makes their entire end product economically impossible to build, and we are thousands of miles away from that threshold. And while the West is obsessing over paper charts, the East is rewriting the rules of finance. India didn't just halt imports this week. Earlier this month, they implemented banking regulations allowing their citizens to pledge physical silver as actual loan collateral. A billion-person economy just permanently upgraded silver from a cultural artifact you wear at weddings to a recognized Tier 1 financial asset inside their banking system. You cannot margin call that. You cannot spoof the order book of an entire sovereign nation that just told its regulators to treat silver like treasury bonds. Stack it all up, 200 million ounces missing from New York, 6 years of structural deficits, a $13 physical premium in China that refuses to die. And the world's biggest buyer is officially monetizing the metal right as their import supply lines get choked off. This isn't a rally, this is a mathematical vice grip, and the only release valve is the price. So, what do you do on Monday morning when the screens light up and your old instincts start whispering those same comfortable lies? Here's your homework. Before the market opens, you look at every single account, ETF, and pool position where you think you own silver. You grab a literal piece of paper and draw a line down the middle on the left side. You write down every position that is merely a contractual claim. It is a promise from a counterparty. And on the right side, you write down the physical metal you can actually touch. Look at the ratio. Just look at it. Every unallocated ETF share is a promise, and every pool account is a promise. And the Wall Street entity making you that promise is the exact same entity currently bleeding millions because they are short the metal you think you own. You are paying storage fees to hold a claim against an institution that literally needs you to fail so they can survive. It's like paying the fox to guard your chickens, and the fox hasn't eaten in a month. When the next manufactured price slam hits, and it will hit, likely hunting those stop losses clustered around $77, the guys holding paper on the left side of that list are going to panic. They'll see the red candles, their stomach will drop, and they'll sell, handing the institutions the exact cheap liquidity they desperately need to cover their shorts. They will do exactly what they were programmed to do. But the person who did the exercise, the person who slowly, methodically moved their wealth from the left column to the right column, they're going to watch that $5 drop and feel absolutely nothing, maybe boredom, because their physical stack doesn't get a margin call, and their metal doesn't rely on the survival of a distressed New York trading desk. The data is screaming at you. The math is undeniable, but here's the most important thing I will tell you today. Size your position so you can survive the volatility. Don't back up the truck. Don't act out of desperation. Buy what you can comfortably hold, even if the paper price gets monkey hammered 40% on a random Tuesday morning. Because if you buy more than you can stomach, you will be the one panic selling at the exact bottom. You will realize the loss. But if you size it right, within your survival buffer, you can just close the app, go for a walk, and wait for the paper illusion to finally crash into physical reality. You do not owe this market your financial safety. You have every right to walk away right now and do nothing. But if you are going to play this, play it like the central banks are playing it. Methodically, quietly, over time, let the math do the heavy lifting. Position small, position real, position physical.